G'day, Ben from Duck Playing Chicken here with the second video in this series on the Valkyrie 3D factory from the Macross universe. So in the last video I basically did a lot of cleanup. I sorted out the Valkyrie as far as the joints and adding a little bit of extra detail. So with the Hangar, there's a few things I want to do, some lighting, and some sort of modifications just to make it look a little bit better than what it is out of the box. Saying that, like I said in the first video, this kit is awesome as far as how much they pack into a very small box. So anyway, let's get onto it. Now I'd really like to get the control box together, but before I do, I really want to do something about these windows. So I think what I'll end up doing is using styrene, using clear styrene, and I haven't yet decided whether I'll paint the back of it black, so basically it's just a shiny black surface that you'll see, or whether I just tint it with like a smoke, like a clear black, so you get an indication of something happening in there, but not necessarily a great, you're not looking completely inside. So before I put this together, I really need to sort of measure up the windows. And for the windows, I'm going to be using this clear sheet styrene, which is 0.4 millimeters thick. So I'm just going to go through the process of basically measuring up the area where I'll be able to glue the windows in place. I'll probably just end up using like some PVA or white glue to hold them in place, but I really need to measure it up before I get this all together, otherwise it's going to be a bit more tricky. So I'll get them all cut out and then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, I've cut out the windows, so you see needs a bit of a clean, but you can see how that sort of looks. Now, given that there's no internal detail on this control tower or control box, whatever it is, I think I'll probably end up just painting the back of the clear pieces black, so that way it sort of looks like it's heavily tinted, but you sort of get an idea of how they'll fit in place, because I think once I get this together, it's not going to look that attractive, the interior of it, so I don't really want to highlight that, given that there's no, there's no interior detail. Okay, so let's look at putting these this control tower together. Given these seams here, you can already see that's probably going to need quite a bit of work, I think. I think I'll use some thicker glue for this one. So I'll use the Revell contactor. And just run a bead along the edge here. And if I do the same on the other side, because what I want to do is sort of get the sides in place, and while the glue is still sort of setting up, I want to be able to put in the floor. Alrighty, now does this one go? Goes on the inside. Oh, that's going to have a lot of seam work. Yeah, so you can see how messy that looks. There's a lot of putty work, I think, for that. Okay, and I'm just going to check that the roof will fit in okay. That looks fine. So there you get an idea of what the control tower looks like, and as you can see, there's sort of no real detail worth looking at in there. So I think blacking out the windows is probably not a bad move. So I won't be gluing the lid in place, just because I need to obviously get the windows in there, and I still haven't quite decided what I'm going to do about lighting. So I was thinking of maybe putting some sort of flashing yellow or orange LED sort of on the top of this, you know, like it was, or on the bottom, like it was a warning that you know, it was about to move. There's also the spotlights, which I haven't sort of decided whether I'm going to light them up or not. So best to just keep the lid off the control box for now until I've sort of decided what I want to do. I need to fill all the gaps in the control box because there are quite a few major gaps. So okay, now I'm going to do this without getting it all over myself. I think I might need to put it on some sort of clip. So this is just the first round of filling the gaps. I am pretty sure that this will need multiple rounds. A bit of a mess of this stuff. It needs to be reasonably thick in there because there's some major gaps. Anyway, you get the idea. So once I've sort of got all that done, let it dry for a good day or so, and then start sanding it. I'll give you a look at the final result. Alright, I've started the cleanup on the control box, and as you can see I've used a lot of putty on it, a lot of cleanup. I also stuck a bit of styrene in here, which is purely for utility. It's just so I can put a clip on it and hold it while I'm painting, just because there wasn't sort of anywhere else I could attach a clip to. I need to give this a coat in grey primer because I think I've missed a few spots, but it's just getting to the point where it's a bit hard to tell. So at this stage, I've done the sort of first round of cleanup. The next thing I wanted to do was add some lights to this. So it has these two sort of, I believe they're spotlights. It's a bit hard to tell. I suspect they're spotlights as opposed to sort of TV screens, but there's one that sort of goes like that, and then there's another one that goes underneath. Now, I'd really like to light these up, and I think I've worked out a way of doing that. So instead of using the stems that sort of come with the kit, because they're not hollow, can't run wires through them, I'm using this styrene tube, which is 2.5mm diameter. And if we look at the bottom one, I've bent it, and the way that I bent it is just using a heat source. I actually did it sort of over my soldering iron. So I've bent this little bit of pipe here. I've got it sitting in the back of the light fixture, and the other thing that I've done is I've cut out the middle of the surround. So now when that goes over there, and I can insert like a piece of clear styrene, I'll probably end up frosting it just so that it diffuses the light a bit better and it's not as bright, sort of looking straight at you. I drilled out a 2.5mm hole on the bottom here, which was actually too much. So what I've done is I've put a little bit of super glue around the edge here just to thicken up that end, just so that I can sort of press fit it in place. So that sort of gives you an idea. I'll straighten this up. And still crooked. So you sort of get an idea what that's going to look. It's a weird design. It's really quite quirky, but I kind of like it because it's quirky. So I want to sort of keep the theme of it, but want to just push the detail a little bit more, so it looks a bit more like an actual light rather than a weird box hanging off a stick. So for the other one, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to start with a 2mm diameter drill bit this time, and so I'm going to use the existing hole as the guide and carefully drill this out. And ironically, this tube, I think, as opposed to 2.5mm diameter, I think it's actually a bit less. So if I drill out a 2mm diameter hole, and then I go in with a file and just wallow out that hole a little bit more until I can fit the tube in there. Yeah, done it again. I've wallowed out the hole too much. Too much. Okay, so let's get some super glue on it and thicken it up a little bit. Just want to make this one a bit shorter. Get my accelerator ready. I've actually got a little bit here that I might use. Don't think it'll need much. Just a little bit of super glue on the end, bit of super glue accelerator, and I think I will need to file this down just a little bit. But I find if you ever need to sort of thicken up a part of a piece to go into a corresponding hole on your kit, super glue works pretty well, just because you can sort of file it back. It gives you a bit of control over it. Now that goes in nice and tight. So for the back piece, I'm going to drill that out again, 2mm hole. Use the existing hole there as a guide, and I'm just using the file to make that hole a little bit bigger so it fits the diameter of the tube. I'm not sure if I want one with a bend on it or whether I want it straight out. What does the other one look like in place? Yeah, so that's sort of what it looks like. I think this one, I will want it to bend down a little bit. Just because, yeah, I think it's a bit strange if it's sort of straight out. I think I might have them both sort of pointing down. Okay, I've got my soldering iron and I've got it sort of pointing in the opposite way in the stand that it should be. So this is at 290 degrees C, so standard heat for a soldering iron. And I'm going to take my styrene tube, I'm just going to hold it over the point, and I'm going to start sort of bending, and you'll feel it gets soft when it's got enough heat into it. So I'm not sticking it on the soldering iron, I'll just pull it away because the heat's done its thing. I don't want too much of a bend in this one, so I reckon that's about right. I'll turn my soldering iron off. So now it's bent, the next step is to just sort of check against the thing. Yeah, I reckon that'll be pretty good actually. It'll put it almost on the same angle as the one down here, which is kind of neat. So I just need to trim this. I've got to thicken up the end of the tube so it holds in this hole properly. Eventually I'll glue it, but for now I'll just sort of show you what it looks like and hold it with my finger. So let's say it goes something like that. Almost looks like it's got legs, doesn't it? I think I cut it shorter here. So the spotlights are actually going to be on the same angle, but they're coming from different sort of arms. So I think that's kind of the way it's going to go. Alright, so the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of hook this up with some light. So I'm just going to be using the same LEDs I'm using for the rest of it, which are 0603 warm white 3-volt LEDs. And so I'll feed them through and just position them sort of roughly, but at least you'll get sort of an idea what the look's going to be. Okay, so I've rigged something up just quickly to sort of give you an idea of the kind of look I'm going for. So I've taken a bit of clear styrene. I think this is just 0.5mm clear styrene, and then I just ran it over a sanding stick just to scuff it up a bit. And I'll have to do a bit more. This is just sort of pretty rough. But if I apply some power, oops, that's the wrong one. Kind of get an idea of what that's going to look like. Now, the surround around the actual globe itself will be silver, and then the actually I should say the reflector will be silver, and then the surround will be sort of black or a dark grey or something like that. But I think that'll work. I think, you know, that'll sort of give me enough of the original kit, but still adding that extra little bit of detail to it to make it pop a little bit more. Alright, so I think the lighting for this, I think I've sort of, I'm almost there. The other thing I want to do is put a flashing orange light on it somewhere. Now if I put a roof on it, kind of my first thought was to put a flashing orange light up here, but that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, given that if this thing's moving, it's probably the people on the ground you want to make aware of it. So I think I might end up putting a flashing orange LED down here somewhere, or maybe even on the sides. I might even put one on each side, I don't know. Might be a little bit much. Okay, so this is a flashing orange light. I'll probably just have that, yeah, probably just on the front. Somewhere like that, just to give the indication that, you know, there's a warning light running. Focus. The LEDs. Sorry, maybe I could use that existing. I don't know, but I'll definitely put it somewhere. Actually, I think underneath's probably better. So I think I'll probably put it just there. Alright, so I think the 3 LEDs in there is probably going to be enough. I think it's going to be maybe a little bit of an overkill, but I think it'll be fine. I can always dim the LEDs, you know, by upping the resistors on them, so they don't have to be super bright, but I think they'll be fine. The other thing I can do is just quickly show you how the control box, how that sort of works with the back of the hanger here. So this bit sort of goes on like that, and then there's a corresponding sort of groove there. It slides over. And then it can sort of slide along here on the thing. Now what I intend to do is have the wires go over the back here, and then drill a hole, or actually I'm thinking it might be better to run a slot along here. That way I can actually still slide this thing along if I wanted to, so the wires can sort of freely move. I think that might be a better option actually. So yeah, that'll be the next step. I'll cut that out, and I might use my nail drill to drill that out, and then that way, yeah, I can still slide the thing along on its rail, and the wires won't get sort of all caught up and everything. So I think that'll be the way to go. And I think that'll be nice and hidden. You know, once this railing goes over the top, you won't sort of see the slot that I've cut out in there. Yeah, so I think that'll be a tidy solution. You can see that's a bit warped. You can sort of see the bend A lot of these pieces, the warpage that's happened on them, I don't know, maybe they were sitting in a hot warehouse or something. I don't know. Yeah, I might have to put some hot water on that one, I think. Sometimes these pieces you can sort of flex a bit with your hand. The plastic of the Hangar actually feels different to the plastic of the Valkyrie. It feels a bit harder, this stuff, so a bit more sturdy than the white plastic of the Valkyrie. Alright, so I think I've got the lighting sorted, you know, the idea for the lighting anyway, sorted for the control box, so I can start moving on from there. I've done a little bit of work off camera, just shortening these arms a little bit for these lights. I've also glued in place the frosted clear styrene for the surrounds, and I should be able to fairly easily mask those in order to paint the surround, so that's not so much of an issue. And they will glue in like so. And of course the reflectors will be painted silver, and then I can stick the LEDs in here with a little bit of UV resin. Now I'm going to take these out for now because I want to add a flashing yellow light or flashing orange light, and I want to sort of add it in here somewhere. So I'm going to take I should mark it first. I think I'll put it in here somewhere. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to drill a hole, and then I'm going to use 1mm fiber optic. So it'll be pretty subtle, but at least it'll be there. It doesn't have to be very big when you think of the scale of this thing. Wouldn't expect it to be massive. Okay, so now I'm going to take a 1mm drill bit, carefully drill the hole out. And I'm just going to check the size of the hole for the... Yep, that's actually pretty good. Okay. So the plan is I'm going to stick an LED to the end of this fibre optic, so I might as well leave it in there so it's holding in place. Use my favourite third hand, bit of blue tack to sort of just prop that up in place. Use my standard sort of cheap UV resin. I've got my tiny flashing LED, and I've just bent the wire a little bit so it's a little bit easier to sort of position. My UV light ready, and I'm going to dunk the LED in the resin, get plenty on there, so we get lined up on the top of the fibre optic. I think that's pretty good. Now that's sort of positioned, I'm going to get a bit more on there just to sort of secure it a bit better. So let's just dump this whole thing in. Let's just drown it. Drown it UV resin, hit it with a torch. Okay, then I can put it back in place on the bottom of the control tower. And you can see how well it works. Okay, so that's all it's going to do. Sort of light under there. It's going to be pretty subtle, but it's going to be there. Yeah, of course I meant to do a lot of light blocking at the top there, but that's pretty straightforward. Now you might be thinking, well, it's really long at the moment, you know, what are you doing? The thing is that I can basically push it all the way through and sort of get it in place when this is all painted ready to go, and then just trim the fibre optic where I need it. So I'm going to leave it long at the moment just because it's going to be sort of easier to handle. I need to put some fabric paint on the end. Just use my old favourite tulip, which of course I learnt this trick from Lou Del Masso, but I'm sure other people have done it as well. Even though the control or observation deck or whatever it is, it's going to be pretty well sealed, I still just want to make sure I don't get any sort of light leaking where it shouldn't go. So I think between, you know, these floodlights and the flashing orange light, I think I'm pretty much ready to go for the lighting on this. So I can sort of put that aside. I've been thinking about the rest of the back wall. I was considering maybe doing some sort of lighting of these panels, but I think I've got another idea for that. I think I might end up sort of using a bit of a different painting technique and some decals to make it look like there's something on those screens. There's sort of not really any kind of indications of sort of lights on here, maybe apart from a couple of greeblies up here, but I don't think I'll need any more lights on the back wall, because when this thing's in place, you know, you're going to have sort of 3 lights coming from this particular part. Also got the railing at the bottom, which I actually haven't checked to see whether that's going to fit, but I think we're going to be safe. Yep, there's a bit of a gap there. It's not going to interfere with it. That's good. It's always worth checking these things before you start painting. You can never sort of check these things enough. So back wall is pretty much good to go. I've cleaned up this slot in the back a bit with, to me, extra thin. Still not pretty. I might clean that up a little bit more. So the next step is to sort of think about some of the other pieces. So this is the tanker. I've cleaned up the seam and glued on the ends of this. Obviously I don't think there's going to be any lights required for this. I don't think it needs it. The wheels, I need to paint those up before I attach those. Now for the base, I was sort of throwing around a few ideas, so I think I've come up with something. So when we sort of look at the base, I was thinking of maybe doing running lights down the middle or something, but I actually don't think that's necessary. I think that would make more sense if it was sort of a runway or something like that, but really it's sort of just a, I guess I see it as, yeah, more of a hangar. And when you think about plane hangars, they don't have lights on the floor generally. But one thing that kind of worries me a little bit is this little bay, the little missile bay, looks a bit bland. Sort of those doors are going to be really flat, and you know, the missiles sort of just sit in there. They don't really look as though they kind of, actually look at that, they don't even fit properly. Oh boy. Yeah, they don't actually fit in straight. Whoops. And I was thinking I would build a, you know, a little missile rack there or something like that, but they don't actually even, let me check that. That's, I'm sure they fit in. I don't want to glue the rest of these missiles together just yet, because I'm actually going to be painting these separate colours, the end bits. Alright, what's going on there? Yeah, they don't fit straight in. Yeah. Okay. Because my sort of plan was to build some sort of rack that they could sit on in there, just out of styrene. I might have to shorten them a little bit. I wonder, where can I shorten them? Yeah, it's not really. Can maybe take a little bit off these ends. I don't know. I'll have to have a bit of a think about that. Alright, I think I've solved the issue with the missiles not fitting into the bay properly. I've actually cut this one down, and it's maybe a little bit tricky to work out where, but it's actually in the sort of stem just before the head of it here. And if I hold up the original, you can just sort of see how the one on the right is shorter. So what I've had to do is obviously take the end off, and I've just cut the last sort of millimetre off that stem there, and then just glued this on. So get rid of this this peg bit and just glue it on. Even though this is going to be painted a different colour to the stem, it's going to be nice and easy to mask off, so I'm not too concerned about having to glue it. Whereas this one on the nozzle on the end is a little bit harder to mask, so I'd prefer to keep that separate until I've actually done the painting. Alright, so now if we test this, we can see that the missile fits in the bay. So I'll go ahead and do the other one. But I wanted to talk about, going back to my original point, which is I want to detail these up a little bit, and I want to do some sort of, I guess, reinforcement sort of beams or something like that on the doors, so that when they're open they look a little bit more interesting than what they are. And I want to create something that sort of holds the missiles in place, so almost like a rack that these missiles would sit on. And I kind of think if you look at it, you know, they'd probably be able to get 3 in there, so I might do it 3 where one of them's, you know, just empty. But at least then there'll be some detail in there when you open up the doors. And then once I've got that sorted, then I can look at potential lighting in here, because I think it'd be kind of cool to have a couple of lights sort of shining within the missile bay, showing what's going on in there, you know, when you open up the doors. So that's the plan. I'll do some sort of experimentation with the rack and sort of determine how I'm going to do that. Okay, I think I've got an idea of how I'm going to make this missile bay, so storage unit, whatever it is, make it a little bit more interesting. So what I've done is I've taken a bit of styrene, what's this stuff called? It's called just strips. So it's 3.2 by 4 millimeters. And this of course is just a evergreen product. And you can see I've measured out sort of a number of semicircles, and I've used the grinding tool to grind those out as best I could. It's not perfect, but given that it's not going to be seen once the missiles are sort of in place, it'll be fine. So I've decided to sort of put that somewhere in the middle, and then it kind of looked a little, still a little bit boring, so I've taken a whole lot of strips of, and this was just in my scraps sort of bin. These is 0.25 mil styrene, I think. There's just some strips I had left over, so I've just cut them to size, and I'm going to lay them in the bottom so it sort of looks like, you know, like part of the structure, some reinforcement. And I've done a couple of different sort of sizes or different widths. And keeping in mind that this is also sort of going to be painted up, but you can kind of get an idea of what I'm going for here. Of course, it looks very stark with it all being in styrene white, so being in white styrene, but once it's all painted up, maybe a bit of dry brushing or something like that, it should be okay. Right, so I'm sort of going with something like that. Now, of course, it doesn't make a lot of sense until I put the missiles in place, so yeah, so it'll look, yeah, sort of something like that. Again, it sort of it looks like a pedestrian crossing at the moment, but trust me, I know it's how it's going to look. It'll be fine. It'll all work out in the end. I might put some sort of cross members going the other way or something like that to break it up a little bit, but at least you sort of get an idea of how they'll sit, and that way when you actually open up the doors, there's going to be something a little bit more interesting there. Now, the other thing that I want to do is put some detail on the doors themselves, and I'm going to follow a similar sort of technique. If you have a look at now, where did I see it? It's on the front of the box. So this is where the illustration actually comes in handy, because it actually sort of gives away a little bit more of what's sort of going on. So you can sort of see down here they've got some detail, you know, to sort of show that the missiles are locked in place, and they've got these nice sort of reinforcement panels on the doors here. The other thing that this illustration has helped me to sort of determine too is that yes, these are TV screens, and right up here you can see the floodlights. So I've confirmed they're not screens, they are actual floodlights, at least based on this illustration here. So I'm taking that as gospel. That'll do for me. So what I want to do is use some strip styrene to sort of generate this kind of pattern on the doors, so it gives it a bit of detail once again when I open it up. And again, I'm going to be using some 0.25mm styrene, and again I'll be just cutting it in sort of strips and laying it on the back and gluing it in place. I think a lot of this I'll probably do off camera just because it's going to be incredibly fiddly, but it's really literally just sort of cutting it to size, putting these bits down. Now the one thing you have to be aware of doing the doors is not to put any sort of plastic strip right on these narrow ends here, because there's a lip here that if you put a bit of plastic in that sort of area, it's going to prevent the doors from sort of sitting flat. So I just need to sort of be aware of that. That should be pretty easy to avoid. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you the result. Alright, so I've done some detail work on the doors, so I'm pretty happy with that. I've sort of gone with the style they include on the box. So that way when the door opens, there's a little bit of extra detail there. Of course, the doors are all going to be painted the same colour, so it's not like it's going to be, you know, super obvious, but at least that detail is going to be there. And the door closes okay, so just detailing it up a little bit. I'm still working on the other door, but once I've done that I can move on to what I'm going to do with the lighting and stick in place the bottom parts of the missile bay. I finalised all the sort of greebly detail I wanted to put in the missile bay. Let's open this up and have a look at it so you can get an idea. It is now a lot more detailed than what it was. So if I take the missiles out, you'll see the detail finally, which was a bit different to what I showed before, and it was after I sort of laid it out and I thought, yeah, I wasn't really happy with that, so I've just gone with this. And of course this is all pretty much 0.25mm thick styrene, apart from the rack itself. So you can see the details on the doors there. If I take those off, this part I sort of still have a little bit of work to do, so I haven't glued that in place yet, but you can sort of see that's yeah, it's pretty rough. But given that this will all be painted the same colour, and it's literally just going to be sort of some panel line work in there that's you're going to bring out the detail. It's hardly going to be seen anyway once the missiles are in there. I did design it so that the missiles can be stacked either way, just because there is the way the missiles are designed. They're not sort of evenly dispersed, I guess, as far as the actual components go. So they can be sort of positioned either way. And I think the idea of having sort of 3 bays was a good one, because I can even do something like this. Sort of so it shows how you would potentially stack more of them in there. So I'm reasonably happy with that. I think I won't know how successful it is really until I've got it all painted up, but it is still a lot better detail in there than what the kit came with. And it's relatively simple to sort of do, you know, it's something that anyone with a few basic tools can make happen. I think the next thing is to work out the lighting for this. So I want to put some sort of form of lighting in place. And I'm not quite sure what I want to do here, whether I want I think I've decided that putting some lights, I was thinking of sort of putting them at each end, but they're going to be heavily obscured by the missiles themselves. So I think if I put some lighting down the sides, and I think I might just put 4 LEDs, so one sort of here, 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 and here, and yeah, I think that'll be enough. It really only has to give sort of an indication. The other thing is I don't want it super bright neither. I think I might run into a problem where with the doors on there, if there's lighting underneath, you might see some of that lighting come up in the gaps here. So I don't know whether I run it in a separate switch or something. Who knows? But I know I definitely want to put some lighting in there so you can pick up some of the detail. I think what I'll do is I'll use some of this 1mm fibre optic. Let's have a look on the back. Just want to make sure I can sort of bend this stuff, because it is a little bit tight in here, so it should be alright. It'd be nice if we could do it just from the one LED if possible. Anyway, I will drill some 1mm holes in here, and then I can start feeding the fibre optic through and having a look at see how well that works. Okay, I'm going to try and show you what this is going to look like. It's a little bit tricky, but you can see there's 2 lights in there. You can see the missiles, oh, sorry, 4 lights. And it's all sort of pretty subtle. What I've done is you can see the fibre optics sort of poking out there, the 1mm fibre optics. I'll turn this over. You can see that I've just sort of loosely gathered them together, put a bit of heat shrink around them, and I'll have to obviously glue these in place. I think I'll be using some 2-part epoxy for that. There's actually quite a bit of these things just want to go back to their flat form, and I can see I'm getting a kink in one of them, so I'll definitely have to sort of glue them in place to prevent things like kinks and stuff. And I'll probably just be using sort of a 3mm LED, white LED for this, but at least I could just use one, and that will cover those 4 little lights in the missile bay. So I think that's done. I can sort of take all this out now because I want to obviously get it painted first, and that's all something that I can do after the base is painted. I can sort of get all the wiring set up. I know I want some overhead lighting, just because I think it'll be nice to have that sort of warehouse lighting look or hangar lighting look, you know, where you've always got sort of reasonably powerful lights pointing down. So for the lighting above, this thing doesn't have a roof as such. All it has are these girders that sort of go in place. Put it like this might be easier. So they sort of sit like that. If I just hold that in place. And so it'd be nice to have something underneath here. I think that this is too narrow to drill a channel in to run any sort of wiring, because I know I want 2 LEDs in here, so I think that's going to be too narrow to try and drill a trench through. So I think what I'll do instead is basically extend the thickness of this lower part of the girder. I'm going to do that using some styrene rectangular tube. So this is the stuff that's 3.2 by 6.3 millimeters. And when you have a look at it, of course it's quite wide here, but it's actually the perfect thickness. It sort of matches the thickness of that girder really well. So I reckon if I cut that down, that'll work. Alright, I've cut the rectangular tube so it's quite a small sort of channel now, and I've also cut it to the length so that I know it will go the full length of the girder. And you can see there's a little check out there, but that's because of the nature of this, where it clips into place. So we get an idea of how that works. So it'll just sit up in there like that, and I will drill 2 holes in here and then run the LEDs in the actual channel. So run the wiring in the channel. And then what I can do is I can glue that in place. I can mask off the holes where the lights come through, and then I can paint this all as one unit. I suspect I'll need to put some putty in here just to make sure it all looks as though it's all part of the same structure. But I think that's probably the best way to go. Worst case scenario, if it doesn't work, I can always cut it all off and sand it back and be done with it. But I think, yeah, if I put 2 lights on each girder, that should look reasonably okay. Alright, so where do I want to position these lights? I think if I get this lined up to where it's going to be, I think if I have one light sort of up the front here, so I'm just going to make a mark there, and let's see, let's put one in the middle towards the back here. Now I need to mark these so I remember which way it goes. So that's front, and this one is back. I'm going to mark, I'm going to just use my hobby knife to center punch the holes. And then if I select a drill bit, I think I'll just go with a 1mm drill bit. I think that'll be enough. Now I'm not going to worry about sort of any kind of diffusion or anything like that. It's literally going to be the lead sort of shining straight through that hole. If you think about sort of lighting you see in hangars or in warehouses, it's usually pretty intense because it's high up. It's not like it's going to blind anyone unless you look directly at it. Okay, so I think that's kind of a good place to start. I think the next thing is to basically get these set in place. So I'm just using a bit of blue tack to hold it down. And I'm going to use some UV resin to set some LEDs down. So the LEDs I'm using are 0603 warm white. The voltage drop for these LEDs is 3 volts. These are pre-wired ones, which I prefer to get just because trying to solder the wires on for these is a nightmare if you try and do it yourself. And I should probably just check that they work. I have had a couple of these not work on me before. It's very rare. I mean, I'll go through hundreds of these things. Yeah, that looks fine. But it's always a good idea to test your LEDs, before you set them down or glue them in place. So I think if I remember rightly, that's the front, who's on the left hand side there. So I'm going to have the wires go towards out the back, and that way I can, so they'll come out here, I can drill a small hole on that corner and just feed the wires directly down and just attach them to the back. I'll probably end up running them underneath. I haven't sort of worked out what I'm going to do for power, but there's a little bit of a cavity in the base for some electronics. Okay, now I need some UV resin, and I'm just using the stuff I normally use. It's the same stuff you use for 3D printing. It's just this stuff's clear. So I'll get a little dab of it on the palette here, and I take my 3D. I think I'll do the back one first. Yeah, it might be easier. So I just dunk it in, get plenty of resin on it, and then get it lined up where I want it, and then hit it with the UV. Just check that to make sure that it's lined up properly. Yep, so that's good. Now I want to lay down these wires and set them in place using some resin, just to make it easier for sort of putting it all in place. I don't want the wires to get crimped or anything like that. So let's get a bit on toothpick here. Now hit it with the UV light again. Yep, pretty happy with that. So now I need to, I'm just going to temporarily attach it to the girder. So I'll put it in place and then get the battery and test it. Yeah, I reckon that'll work pretty well. They're pretty bright. It's a bit hard to see sort of on camera because I've got bright lights above, but they are pretty bright, and they actually sort of look to scale, so I'm pretty happy about that. So the next step is to glue these in place. Just a quick look at how the girders came up. You can see I've used some putty in there just to make sure that it's nice and flush with the rest of the girder. But I think once it's all painted up in the same colour, you'll hardly notice. So I think that's come up all right. All the lighting and the basic sort of sub-assemblies are now in place. So I think I'm ready for priming everything. I'm sure there'll be some more cleanup. But just to give you sort of a look at what it looks like at this stage, and try and do this without it having all falling apart. And you can sort of see the control box there. The floodlights are sort of not quite right. I've got to manipulate those tubes a little bit better, but of course the Valkyrie will sit in there like that. We have the three figures, which I think once they're all painted up, I think I've got a method in place for sort of allowing them to stand of their own volition. And then we've got the little tanker. So as far as the wiring goes, out the back you can sort of see these are the wires for the lights that come down off the girders. There will also be some wires coming out of this slot here, which will be for the floodlights and also the flashing orange light on the control box. And then there'll be some sort of wiring underneath for the four lights that I'm going to have in the missile bay. And of course that's just one LED. As far as power goes for all the lights on this kit, I'm going to use one of these. So this is like a slimline USB-C socket. So that will fit on the base, no worries. And yeah, we'll take it from there. So I'm going to leave this video here. Just because there has been quite a bit of stuff, you know, modifications here and there for the Hangar part of the kit. So I'll leave it there, and the next episode will be about, of course, the painting. So until then, I'll catch you later.